everyone, this is Mary here in Mary Reads. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we are going to talk about the most famous writers. So last week I made a video about the most famous, the most popular, the most read books in between 1990 to 1999. And this time I decided to talk about the most famous authors. Though this time we're going to be talking about the most famous authors in history. And of course, there are a lot of them. We have a lot of classical writers that are so popular that we know about, we talk about, we read them. And their books sold millions and millions of copies. But I chose the most famous 10 authors, and we will talk about them. So if you don't see Tolstoy or Dostoevsky in this video, it doesn't mean that they were not popular at all. They are some of the most popular writers and they are on the list, though they're not in top 10. So that's why some authors might not be there. So we'll start with the least famous author, if you can even say that, because they all sold hundreds of millions of copies. But we'll start from number 10 and we'll start moving up to number 1. And number 10 is Gilbert Patten. This author was born in 1866 in Maine, so he's an American writer, and he was famous for writing dime novels. Dime novels were these inexpensive paperback novels that working class could afford, and I think that's part of why he is one of these most famous authors, not just because he was writing masterpieces, but also because he was writing for a wider audience. More people could buy his books. Dime novels were popular in the US in late 19th century to early 20th century, and Gilbert Patten sold almost 500 million copies of his books. And I'm pretty sure it wasn't just in that period of the end of 19th century until the beginning of 20th century. We still read his books. So over time, overall, since he started writing his books, he sold almost 500 million copies. Number 9 is the author that we all know. She has to be in this list. I knew that she will be there before I started research for this video. I would be very surprised if she wasn't there. And it's J.K. Rowling with her Harry Potter series. We all know the story of J.K. Rowling, probably. If you don't, I'll tell it in a second. She was a single mother. She was struggling with money. She was even thinking about ending her life because of so many struggles she had. But she once decided to try writing this story. The idea came to her on a train, and she pursued the story, and the story about the boy who lived made J.K. Rowling a billionaire in a couple years only, which is crazy. She sold more than 500 million copies of her books. She also launched a franchise of films, merchandise, and there are even amusement parks dedicated to Harry Potter's story. And J.K. Rowling is always this symbol of hope and strength for me. I always think about her whenever something doesn't go right or doesn't go the way I want it to. She brought the first Harry Potter book to so many publishing houses, and she got rejections all over the place. And this one small publishing house, Bloomsbury Publishing, decided to take a chance and publish this book in a very, very small edition. They made a very small number of copies. I don't remember the number now, but it was a very, very low number. And they told her to get a daytime job because this book will definitely not pay for anything. And look at her now. Look how not giving up hope and trying can bring you to being a billionaire in a couple of years. So yeah, J.K. Rowling is number 9 of our list. Sidney Sheldon is number 8 on our list, and Sidney Sheldon was born in Chicago in 1917. He started his career writing Broadway plays and screenplays for Hollywood, and he only started writing books when he turned 50. So he decided to switch careers and become a writer. In his life, he wrote 18 books in suspense romance genre, and he sold somewhere in between 370 million to 600 million copies. So that's why he's number 8 and not number 9. It's kind of hard to tell exactly how many copies he sold because not everybody's keeping track like that. But based on the resources, It's somewhere between 370 to 600 million copies. Sidney Sheldon is known for writing only about places that he knows. He's being very meticulous, very careful about how he describes a place. So in one of the interviews that he had, he said that if you read about a certain place in his books, that means that he's been to that place, he researched that place, he took pictures of that place, and he knows exactly what he's writing about. Because it's very important for him to be realistic and know exactly how the place works, what the culture, what the nature, what the history is. Number 7 is Enid Blyton. She was born in 1897 in East Dulwich in the UK, and she was writing children's books. So she wrote in many different genres. All of the books were for kids, but she wrote in many different genres like education, fantasy, mystery, some biblical narratives, nature. So she covered all the different types of topics. And she sold over 600 million copies of her books, and she's still very popular. Her books are still selling very well. In her career, she wrote over 800 books, which is crazy, 800. And her career was only 40 years long. So that means that she was writing, what, about 20 books per year? That is just crazy. That means that she was spending less than a month writing a book. That's amazing. That's just extraordinary. Enid Blyton got popular when she was 14, or if not popular, then at least recognized and known. Her poem was published in one of the children's magazines when she was 14. Number 6 is George Simenon, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing the name correctly. He was a Belgian author, and I don't really know how to read Belgian names, but let's call him George. For the sake of time, let's call him George. George was born in 1903 in Belgium, and he wrote over 400 novels and short stories in his career. So he was a very, very gifted writer, and he was mostly writing detective stories, and some of his most popular ones, most famous ones, are the ones featuring Jules Maigret. So Jules Maigret is basically an Hercule Poirot. It's kind of the same type of character. He's a detective or a police officer, so he tries to uncover mysteries. George is put on the same scale with Agatha Christie, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Edgar Allan Poe. So his mystery novels are considered classic. They are on the same scale as those writers, and he's very popular for those novels. He sold somewhere in between 500 to 700 million copies. So again, it has to be a rough number just because you don't know the exact number of copies sold. So somewhere in between 500 to 700 million copies. And we're moving to our top 5 writers. Number 5 is Harold Robbins. Harold Robbins was born in New York City in 1916, and he started as a clerk for Universal Pictures. He rose to become an executive, and then he transitioned to becoming a writer. He wrote over 25 books, and all of them were best-selling. So in total, his books sold around 750 million copies, give or take. But Robbins got popular even before his books. He became a millionaire by the age 20 when he was buying and selling options on farmers' produce. Number 4 is Danielle Steel. She was born in 1947 in New York City, and she wrote her first novel when she was 31 in 1978. She was writing romantic novels about rich families and their personal crises, some of the situations they get in. So if not all, then most of her books are about that. They're romantic novels. And she wrote 190 novels in her career since she started writing at 31, which is a lot. And she sold more than 800 million copies of her books. I've actually never read anything by Danielle Steel before, but she has a pretty interesting history, and I'm thinking about reading one of her books next year. So if you know what book would be good to start, please let me know. Write it down in the comments and I will read it, because I really would like to read something by this author. Our top 3. Number 3 is Barbara Cartland. She was born in Birmingham in the UK in 1901. Barbara Cartland wrote 723 books that were mostly romances, and even though not many of her books sold more than 1 million copies, which is still a lot if you think about it, that's crazy. But because she wrote so many books, she was able to become one of the most read, most sold out authors. Her books sold somewhere in between 800 million to 1 billion copies. She was not only known for her books though, she was also a columnist in the Daily Mirror paper. She was a society lady, and she also, interestingly, designed wallpaper, which I think is super cool. Number 2, of course, she had to be here. The Queen of Mystery, Agatha Christie. She has a title of world's best-selling novelist, and she sold somewhere in between 2 to 4 billion copies of her books. She's also one of the most translated authors. Agatha Christie was born in 1890 in Torquay in the UK, and she started writing mystery novels as a challenge when her sister told her that she can't actually do it. So she decided to take that challenge, and she wrote her first novel, which ended up being very, very popular. And that novel, if I'm not mistaken, was The Mysterious Affair in Styles. Since then, mystery novels dominated Christie's career, and once, as a true mystery lover, she disappeared. She found out that her husband was cheating on her first husband. And one day she got her clothes together, got into a car, and took off. And nobody could find her for 11 days until she was recognized at a spa hotel where she registered by the name of her husband's mistress. She claimed to not remember that situation. She claimed that she had amnesia and she doesn't remember doing any of that, but we'll never know if maybe she did that on purpose. And number 1 writer, everybody has heard of him. If you haven't read any of his plays or sonnets, you have at least heard the name of William Shakespeare. He was born in 1564 at Stratford-upon-Avon in the UK, and he is very well known for his plays like Romeo and Juliet, Othello, Hamlet, as well as his sonnets. He wrote 154 sonnets, and he wrote 3 long narrative poems. Shakespeare was an actor as well as a writer. He sometimes played in his own plays. For example, in Hamlet, he played a ghost. And interestingly enough, if it wasn't for plague, we might not have gotten his sonnets and his poems. He only started writing those when the plague hit and all the theaters were closed. So he was sitting at home and decided to try himself writing poems and sonnets. And these were the 10 most popular authors in the world. Please let me know if you agree with this list or you know of somebody else that I might not have put down here. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.